If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. Today I wanted to come on the show and give you some encouragement as we wrap up this year. 2020 has been tough, and I want to help you end it strong as far as your recovery goes. Through the rest of December, I want you to make progress toward freedom from binge eating and not fall into the trap of just giving up on recovery and saying you'll quit binge eating in the new year, which you may have done in other years and you may be feeling tempted to do now. I wrote a blog post about this recently, and I'll link to that in the show notes as well, but I wanted to come on the podcast and give you some additional ideas as it relates to trying to end the year more positively with your eating, even despite everything that's going on in the world and in your life, and despite how different this holiday season will be compared to years past. Even if you've previously struggled with increased binge eating around the holidays, this is your chance to do things differently and have the rest of this month be successful. And I'm not suggesting that you can do things differently and be successful this year with your eating because your circumstances will be different during the holidays. You can make changes regardless of your circumstances. And if you listen to this podcast regularly, you know that I teach that what is happening around you is not the cause of your binging. And what you're feeling or how stressed you may or may not be is also not the cause of your binging. Your urges to binge are what drive you to binge. And you can learn to respond to those urges differently and not follow them in any situation. One thing that will not be different this year, if you're someone who struggles with binge eating, is that you'll likely have what I'll call resolution thoughts, as it's related to food and recovery. As part of your urges to binge, you'll likely have thoughts that say that you should just binge now and through the rest of December and start fresh in the new year. Remember that an urge to binge is any thought, feeling, or physical sensation that encourages binge eating. So this type of resolution thought, the thought that you're going to resolve to quit in 2021, so you might as well binge in 2020, is a part of the urge to binge. And to make progress at the end of this year, you need to stop believing that thought and stop giving it attention. You're definitely not alone if you've followed this thought in the past, whether that was yesterday or last year around this time. When I was a binge eater, the final weeks before the new year usually included my worst binges. I'd often have thoughts like, well, I can't stop binge eating now. There's too much tempting food around this time of year. Or I'm too busy with the holidays to even bother with recovery. Or I'll binge all I want through the end of this month and then I'll quit January 1st. I also had thoughts telling me that all of the socializing around the holidays stressed me out, so there was no way that I could avoid binging. I also told myself that I could not handle eating with others and hearing all of the talk of food and weight around the holidays. So I told myself I might as well just wait until after the holidays to quit. One thing I want you to stop and take notice of here is that the lower brain, which is that primal part of the brain that drives binge eating, is very opportunistic. Its job is to maintain your habit, and it's going to provide seemingly logical and compelling reasons to binge in a variety of situations and in response to a variety of feelings. Just because your circumstances change around the holidays this year does not mean that your lower brain is going to give up on urging you to binge. You'll simply have different seemingly logical and compelling thoughts. For example, instead of thinking that socializing and eating with others is so stressful that you need to binge, you'll have thoughts that you need to binge because you're lonely without holiday gatherings, or because you're sad because you can't spend time with those you love. Or instead of your lower brain telling you that the holiday food at work or at social events makes you binge, you'll have thoughts that say the lack of holiday food and therefore the lack of satisfaction means that you're justified to binge to get that pleasure. I definitely want to encourage you to notice how your brain is trying to encourage you to binge around this time of year. And I want you to realize that although the content of your thoughts may be different this year due to your circumstances, the goal of those thoughts and those urges is the same: to maintain your habit by driving you to binge. Regardless of the reasons your brain gives you for binge eating, it's all just junk from your lower brain that you no longer need to pay any attention to. No matter when these thoughts show up, you can learn to dismiss them. And if you're new to the podcast and to the concept of dismissing urges to binge, I want to let you know that you can get my free ebook, The Brain Over Binge Basics, in the show notes. It's a 30-page PDF that gives you all of the fundamentals of this approach, and I hope that it helps guide you to learn how to respond to your urges differently. Now I want to talk a little about why December in particular is a time that your brain tends to rev up as far as producing those binge-promoting thoughts. I think the primary reason is that you've conditioned your lower brain, that primal part of your brain, to see the days and the weeks leading up to a new resolution or a fresh start as a binge-eating opportunity. You may do this at other times of the year as well, or you may be someone who promises to start fresh, for example, every Monday. But right now we're going to talk about the new year because it's the time when you likely set your biggest resolution. The thing is, when you tell yourself you'll quit binge eating at the start of a new year, it can seem to give your lower brain that opportunity. It can seem to give you a pass to binge as much as possible in December. I know that was certainly the case for me for many years while I was a binge eater. That lower part of my brain seemed to view the days leading up to January 1st as a nonstop chance to binge. At the time, I didn't understand how my lower brain worked, and I thought that my binge urges were expressing my true desires and what I really wanted. I also thought that I was emotionally broken and that I somehow needed to binge to cope with the holidays. So I went along with my lower brain, all the while telling myself that once January arrived, that I would leave binge eating in the past. What I didn't know was that my lower brain was repeating a habitual and predictable pattern that's common in binge eaters, and really in anyone with a destructive habit. I'll call it the one last time mindset. And when binge eaters get into this mindset or this rut, they repeatedly promise that each binge will be their last, and promise to quit afterward. I explained this pattern in detail in episode 14, which was titled Overcome One Last Time Thoughts to Quit Binge Eating. So if you want more information about this, you can listen to that episode. Now, in December, instead of telling yourself that it's your last time or your last binge, you may start telling yourself that this is your last year of binging. You tell yourself that after December, you'll be done binge eating for the rest of your life. So these are the final weeks and the final year of you being caught up in this binge eating habit. Because you do feel committed to quitting on January 1st, you might just stop any attempts to curb your binge eating at the end of the year. You may allow your lower brain's desire for that temporary pleasure of binges to completely run the show. And you end up feeling awful from the binges in December. It's not like you get this temporary pleasure and it makes you feel good and it improves your holidays. It makes you feel terrible. It ruins your holidays. But even though you're miserable, when you remember that you'll quit in January, you really see no point in even trying to stop now. You just accept that you're going to keep binging until the clock strikes midnight on January 1st and marks a new year and a new you. But as I'm sure you've realized in other years, January is not this magical time when all of your problems suddenly disappear. It's just a continuation of your life with all its problems, difficult emotions, and challenging circumstances. I remember that during my years of binging, January 1st seemed to always come with sort of a sense of dread. I wondered if I could really quit, and I felt confused and frustrated that my desire to binge was still the same on New Year's Day that it had been on New Year's Eve. In December, I feel like it was comforting to believe that a new year would bring a swift recovery. But looking back, it seems like my resolutions only served as excuses prior to the resolution's start date. If I told myself I was quitting tomorrow, next week, or next year, it gave me a reason to binge today, this week, or this year. On January 1st, or shortly after, I began to resent the new year because of this struggle that I felt of trying to avoid binges. I found myself wishing it were December again, when I felt like I could just binge without even considering quitting, even though I could look back and rationally see that December had been miserable and it had caused me so much pain and shame. Until 2005, when I finally quit, nothing I had tried to help myself stop binge eating had worked. So I always found myself binge eating again by about January 5th of each new year. In my first book, Brain Over Binge, I talked about that first New Year's Eve 15 years ago when I did not have to make a resolution to stop binge eating. This was about a half of a year after I stopped binge eating for good. And that night I was not with family or friends or at a party. I was taking care of some of my very young relatives and they were already asleep. So I was simply alone with my thoughts, watching others ring in the new year on television. And this is where most of us will be this year. It was just a wonderful feeling that night, just laying there and knowing that the next year would be different, that I would not just binge again in a few days, and that I would never have to resolve to quit binge eating again, because I was already done. I want to encourage you that you can do December and the new year very differently this time around. No matter what your thoughts are saying to you now in December, I want you to remember that your binge eating habit will not suddenly go away come January 1st. Your lower brain has no regard for time, and it will send urges automatically, no matter what day or what year it is. I know that you don't want to spend another December or holiday season being miserable, promising yourself that you'll do better in January. You can do better now. You can learn to recognize all of those faulty brain messages that drive you toward binge eating and stop believing them. You can stop believing thoughts that say it somehow makes sense to continue binging through this month. You know that it does not make sense, and you can absolutely break this cycle. Just think how amazing you'll feel if you gain control of your binging before the new year, before the start of your typical resolution. Challenge yourself to do something different this year. Break your pattern and stop waiting until later to have freedom from binge eating. As a final note, I want to tell you that I did a lot of thinking during this difficult year about how to better help people overcome this habit and make resources more available to everyone. And so in addition to this podcast and the blog and the free ebook and my books as well, I've decided to start offering my course for only a $10.99 monthly subscription price. My hope is that this makes the course doable for anyone who wants to be free of binge eating, especially during the times that we're living in. There's no commitment on this subscription. You can just use the course for as much time or as little time as you need and then cancel whenever you're ready. With the $10.99 monthly subscription, you get the entire course right away, and the course now includes 116 audios to guide you in recovery, and I'll also be adding a new Q&A audio each month. Plus, you'll get immediate access to a new app that we've recently set up to make it easy to listen on mobile, so listening to the course will be just as easy as it is to listen to the podcast. I'll still continue to offer the course for the regular one-time fee, which gets you access that does not expire. And if you think you'll use the course in some way for a while, then this is still the best value for you. But I understand that it can be difficult to make any kind of larger financial commitment right now, which is why I'm offering the monthly subscription. When I started the Brain Over Binge course, it was very time intensive for me, but through the years and through changes in the course, as well as changes in my life, the course is now set up in a much more affordable, self-paced format. The course has tremendous value. In it, I share everything that I've learned over the years of helping binge eaters, and I'll continue to add to the course over time. I hope that having these additional resources in the course will help guide you toward getting your life back. You can learn more about the course and the new subscription in the show description, or by going to brainoverbinge.com and clicking course in the main menu. One last thing I want to mention is that also in the show description, you'll see that you can still get the podcast discount if you buy no expiration access to the course. That's that one-time fee. I'll keep that discount available for podcast listeners through the end of 2020. But in January, I'll simplify things and just offer the two options: the $10.99 monthly pay-as-you-go with no commitment subscription, and then the no expiration access where you pay a one-time fee and have continuing access. I hope that you'll check out the course, and I really appreciate you joining me today. I hope that you have success in December and ignore those lower brain messages that tell you to binge now and to recover later. You can end this habit now and never look back. And with that, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.